Welcome back to Crime Documentary Files. Today's case takes place on the southwest side of Hong Kong Island. Here lies a small island named Aberdeen, which covers only 0.5 square miles, but is home to 90,000 people. The main character in this story is a 25-year-old woman named Huiyu, who worked as an accountant. She was a great communicator with many friends. At one point, she had her romantic fortune read online, which indicated that her love life was flourishing. However, a master later warned her, "You need to exercise restraint. If you're not careful, you could face deadly consequences." Unfortunately, this ominous prediction came true in a horrifying way. So, what exactly happened? Let's rewind to October 27th, 2010. It was a Wednesday, and around 8:30 a.m., some people were fishing along the coast of Aberdeen. The morning sun was shining brightly, the sea breeze gently blew across the sand, and the ocean sparkled like silver. However, in stark contrast to this idyllic scene, near the trash dump on Li Nan Road, the fishermen noticed something unusual floating in the water. Curious, they set down their fishing rods and walked closer to investigate. What they found was shocking. The partially clothed body of a woman, drifting in the water. After regaining their composure, they immediately called the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene and brought the victim's body to shore. The victim was a woman, approximately 5 feet 3 inches, around 25 years old. She was found face down, with her back facing the sky. She was wearing a gray top, but nothing below the waist. There were some injuries on her hands and neck, though they weren't severe. It appeared that she might have collided with some rocks while drifting in the sea. That evening, news outlets reported on the incident, and the following day, several people came forward to identify the body. The police confirmed the victim's identity as 25-year-old Huiyu. The day before, her parents had received a call from her coworkers asking why she hadn't shown up for work. Confused, they mentioned that their daughter hadn't slept at home the previous night, but had called to let them know. Throughout the day, they tried unsuccessfully to contact her. It wasn't until that evening, when they saw the news on TV, that they were horrified to recognize the body found at Aberdeen as their daughter. It was then they suspected something terrible had happened to her. Since the victim had recently passed away, her face was only slightly swollen and deformed. Along with a smallpox vaccination scar on her arm, her parents were certain it was their daughter. According to the investigation, Huiyu was born in 1985 in Huiyu, China. At 12 years old, she moved to Hong Kong with her family. She was the eldest of 5 siblings, and the entire family of 7 lived together in Kwai Fong, Hong Kong. Huiyu graduated with a degree in tourism from the Hong Kong Institute of Vocational Education. After graduation, she changed jobs multiple times over the course of 3 years. Before her death, she worked as an accountant at a company in Shenzhen and was considering a job change. Huiyu was beautiful and had many admirers, but none of her relationships lasted long, mostly involving co-workers she met through work. Her close friend Jenny mentioned, Huiyu always caught everyone's attention. Many guys were infatuated with her. However, she had a strong desire to marry a foreigner and settle abroad, so she paid special attention to foreign men. She frequently visited Lan Kwai Fong, a popular area for bars, and continuously searched for a suitable boyfriend. In February 2010, Huiyu met a German colleague named Thomas. They quickly became romantically involved, and after just 2 months of dating, she introduced him to her parents. She even made their relationship public on social media, writing "Ich liebe dich," I love you in German, on her profile to express her feelings for him. Thomas also vowed, "I will take you to Germany to live with me." However, Thomas was later transferred to Beijing for work, and their relationship ended. Huiyu's dream of moving abroad seemed within reach, but it ultimately fell apart. Devastated and desperate, she sought guidance from a master fortune teller. The master predicted, "You have a strong romantic fortune, but I advise you to remain virtuous. If you continue to live recklessly at best, you'll lose everything, and at worst, you could face deadly consequences." Since then, Huiyu followed the master's advice and started to make changes. Previously, she would often go out drinking with male friends until late at night and let them take her home. But after listening to the master, she began to go out drinking alone and took a taxi home by herself. However, these changes were not enough to save her. According to Huiyu's parents, on the afternoon of October 26th, after finishing work, their daughter came home as usual and spent some time chatting online with friends. Suddenly, she stopped talking and hurried out. Later, they received a call from her saying she was going to have drinks with friends in Lan Kwai Fong and told them not to worry. Little did they know, the next time they would see their daughter, she would be a lifeless body. Huiyu's parents were devastated. They provided the police with some clues. Although she had broken up with her German boyfriend Thomas in July of that year, Thomas returned to Hong Kong and the two rekindled their relationship. Even after Thomas went back to Beijing, Huiyu continued to stay in touch with him, occasionally calling each other. She once complained to her parents about the high phone bills, but from her words, it was clear she still had hope for a future with Thomas. Therefore, the possibility that Huiyu had intentionally jumped into the sea could be ruled out. Moreover, when she left home, Huiyu was wearing tight jeans and a loose top. However, when her body was found, the jeans were missing. Typically, a loose top would be more likely to be swept away by the water. Her home was in Kwai Chung. To get from Lan Kwai Fong to Kwai Chung, you would head north, but the sea at Aberdeen, where her body was found, is located south of Lan Kwai Fong, about 6 miles away by car. According to Jenny, Huiyu had an ex-boyfriend named Fai, who worked as a manager at a convenience store. During the investigation, Fai stated that he had worked the night shifts on October 25th and 26th. The police confirmed that he was not at home on those nights, which made him a potential suspect. His current girlfriend also revealed that he had been acting strangely, almost like he was losing his mind. The police immediately brought Fai in for questioning. He admitted that he still had lingering feelings for Huiyu. When they checked his phone records, the police discovered that he had arranged to meet Huiyu on the nights of October 25th and 26th. On the first night, Huiyu did not show up at the meeting spot. The following night, he also didn't see her, so he ended up hanging out with friends until the next morning. Fai's friends confirmed this to the police. After ruling out Fai as a suspect, the police shifted their focus to the victim's German boyfriend, Thomas. As the victim's parents had mentioned, Thomas and Huiyu had broken up once during the 2010 World Cup. After that, Thomas returned to Hong Kong and they got back together. When the World Cup ended in August, Thomas returned to Beijing for work, leaving Huiyu behind in Hong Kong. Despite this, she continued to miss her German boyfriend deeply, not only spending a lot on long-distance calls, but also saving up to visit him in Beijing. However, on the day of the crime, Thomas was not in Hong Kong, so he could not have been the perpetrator. The police went to Huiyu's home to collect personal items, including her computer. Based on the clues gathered over the next 2 days, the police interviewed nearly 50 people, mostly men, to gather statements. Wen, a restaurant worker who had worked with Huiyu, was shocked and saddened to hear of her death. He admitted that while they worked together, he developed feelings for Huiyu and tried to pursue her, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Wen mentioned that even though he only worked with her for 3 months before leaving, Huiyu's cheerful and friendly personality made her well-liked by everyone at the restaurant. 3 days after the incident, the forensic report was released. The victim had stiff limbs, froth around her mouth, and swollen lungs filled with water, indicating that she was still breathing when submerged. Small blood spots on her eyelids suggested that she had been strangled while still alive. This meant that her heart was still beating when she was thrown into the sea, and she later drowned. The time of death was estimated to be between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., about an hour before the fishermen discovered her. The police deployed a search team along the Aberdeen coastline to look for Huiyu's belongings, but they found nothing. They suspected that Huiyu had been murdered elsewhere, and her body was then dumped into the sea at Aberdeen's waterfront. Among the 50 people interviewed, one man caught the attention of the police. His name was Wen Jiancong, 43 years old, standing 5 feet 10 inches with a muscular build. He had passed the police academy entrance exam and later became a patrol officer. Everyone thought his life would go smoothly from there, but in his 7th year on the force, he was accused of attempting to assault a colleague's girlfriend. Another source revealed that he was arrested for taking nude photos to blackmail someone. Whatever the reason, Wen Jiancong was dismissed from the police force and served 10 months in prison. After his release, due to his criminal record, he struggled to find a decent job and was forced to work as a taxi driver. At that time, driving a taxi in Hong Kong was a well-paying job, earning about 10,000 Hong Kong dollars per month, roughly 1,300 US dollars. However, Wen Jiancong was not content with this. He was fined twice for driving while his license was suspended. To increase his income, Wen Jiancong adapted to the trend of providing ride-hailing services. Huiyu was one of his regular customers. The reason the police suspected Wen Jiancong was because the last call Huiyu made was to him. Between October 26th and 28th, he called and texted Huiyu a total of 4 times. When the police reviewed surveillance footage near the trash dump on Linan Road, they spotted a taxi in the area. After checking the license plate, they confirmed that Wen Jiancong was the driver. The police summoned him for questioning. Wen Jiancong appeared very distraught, crying and saying that he hadn't been able to reach Huiyu for several days and was extremely worried about her. He claimed he never imagined he would never see her again. When the police asked where he was on the night of October 26th, Wen Jiancong stated that he was picking up passengers near Hong Kong. However, this explanation only increased the police's suspicion, as Hong Kong and Aberdeen are on opposite sides of a strait, making it entirely possible for Wen Jiancong to have committed the crime. Realizing he had possibly misspoken, Wen Jiancong then claimed that Huiyu had called him that night to tell him not to pick her up. However, this explanation only made him seem more suspicious. As expected, when the police searched Wen Jiancong's taxi, they found bloodstains inside the vehicle. Wen Jiancong explained that he transported dozens of passengers every day and suggested that one of them, possibly a woman on her period, might have accidentally left the stain. Additionally, a piece of fabric was found in the trunk, which could have come from the coat Huiyu was wearing. However, since the coat was missing, they couldn't verify this immediately. Further investigation revealed that in early October, Huiyu had gone shopping with a friend. The friend had liked a coat, but couldn't find it in her size, so Huiyu ended up buying it herself. The police tracked down the manufacturer of the coat and obtained an identical one for comparison. The fabric fibers on the coat matched those found in the trunk of Wen Jiancong's taxi. DNA testing also confirmed that the blood in the taxi was Huiyu's. Combined with the surveillance footage from the camera near the Linan Road trash dump, the police now had enough evidence to arrest Wen Jiancong. 5 days after the crime, the police found Wen Jiancong at a tea house in Kowloon. He was hooded, handcuffed, and escorted to the police station. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, Wen Jiancong could no longer deny his actions. He confessed to the crime and revealed the entire story. It turned out that despite their 18-year age difference, there was a connection between this taxi driver and Huiyu. One year earlier, on a night in November 2009, Wen Jiancong met Huiyu for the first time. That evening, Huiyu had been out drinking in Lan Kwai Fong and, as usual, took a taxi home. By fate, the taxi driver that night happened to be Wen Jiancong. Huiyu got into the passenger seat, and because she was dressed quite provocatively, wearing a strong perfume mixed with the scent of alcohol, Wen Jiancong couldn't take his eyes off her. Her beautiful appearance and alluring figure captivated him. Huiyu, being an open and friendly person, started chatting with Wen Jiancong as soon as she got into the car. She mentioned that she often went out drinking in Lan Kwai Fong at night and almost always needed a taxi to get home in the early morning. Hearing this, Wen Jiancong offered to pick her up regularly. To his surprise, Huiyu happily agreed. They exchanged contact information, and over the next 3 months, Wen Jiancong became Huiyu's personal driver. They grew closer, and their relationship became more intimate. Initially, Huiyu half-jokingly asked Wen Jiancong if he could give her a discount on the taxi fare. Unexpectedly, he agreed immediately. By February 2010, they were no longer just a driver and a passenger, but a couple dating. Wen Jiancong admitted that he had fallen in love with Huiyu at first sight. He started driving her to work for free, paying for their meals whenever they went out, and occasionally buying her gifts. Even though he wasn't financially well off, Wen Jiancong was willing to spend money on Huiyu out of love. When he ran out of money, he borrowed from friends. Coincidentally, Huiyu met her German boyfriend Thomas in February as well. From that point on, she began maintaining relationships with both men. Wen Jiancong was aware that Huiyu had a boyfriend. He understood that he was just a taxi driver, with limited financial resources and a narrow social circle, nowhere near as well off as her official boyfriend. Despite this, he still hoped that she would choose him. By July of that year, during the World Cup, Huiyu borrowed 10,000 Hong Kong dollars from Wen Jiancong to buy household items. Seizing the opportunity, Wen Jiancong suggested that they have a weekly heart-to-heart talk. To his surprise, Huiyu agreed. Overjoyed, he immediately transferred the money to her bank account. Their relationship grew increasingly intimate. From then on, they would meet each week at secluded spots like Wujisan Mountain and Repulse Bay for their secret encounters. They even created a code name, Mailbox, to refer to their meetings in the car. After each encounter, Huiyu would typically receive 500 or 1,000 Hong Kong dollars from Wen Jiancong. This ambiguous, undefined relationship continued for 3 months. During this time, Huiyu frequently asked Wen Jiancong for money, citing various reasons. Wen Jiancong became more deeply entangled in this affair, pouring more and more money into Huiyu, even believing that she might eventually leave her German boyfriend for him. However, in reality, Huiyu was quietly saving up this money to prepare for her future life in Germany. As time passed, on October 26th, Huiyu once again invited Wen Jiancong for an encounter. That evening, after picking her up from Lan Kwai Fong, Wen Jiancong drove to the entrance of a cemetery near Tai Tsing Chow village. The place was deserted and quiet. There was no one else around. They were pleased with the location and began their usual activities. Unexpectedly, in this remote area, there were occasional passers-by. Suddenly, a car approached, startling them. They quickly stopped what they were doing and sat talking in the car. They hadn't even put their clothes back on when Huiyu mentioned that her boyfriend, Thomas, would be returning to Hong Kong on November 1st. She smiled excitedly, talking about her bright future with Thomas, completely oblivious to Wen Jiancong's feelings. At this point, already frustrated by the car that interrupted them, and now hearing that Huiyu was planning to leave Hong Kong, Wen Jiancong felt extremely irritated and uneasy. However, the worst was yet to come. Huiyu's next statement pushed him over the edge. She said, "This will be the last time we're together." To avoid being caught cheating by her boyfriend, she needed to end her relationship with Wen Jiancong. However, she still had some debt at the bank and didn't want Thomas to find out about it, so she asked Wen Jiancong to lend her an additional 10,000 Hong Kong dollars as a breakup fee. Upon hearing this, Wen Jiancong angrily responded, "I've treated you so well. I'm deep in debt because of you, and this is how you repay me." The two argued fiercely in the car, and the confrontation quickly escalated. Taking advantage of the fact that they were both undressed, Huiyu elbowed Wen Jiancong hard in the groin. Struck in a sensitive area, Wen Jiancong was in pain, furious, and began losing control. He flew into a rage, assaulted her, and then used both hands to strangle Huiyu for 2 minutes until she lost consciousness. Panicked, Wen Jiancong believed he had killed her, but in reality, Huiyu was still alive at that moment. In his frantic state, he threw her underwear, jeans, and blue canvas shoes into the roadside bushes, then carried her body to the trunk of his car and drove to the seaside near the trash dump on Linan Road in Aberdeen. Around 9 p.m. he arrived but had to wait because there were many people fishing and filming in the area. It wasn't until 2:30 a.m. when the place was deserted that he finally dumped Huiyu's body into the sea. What's noteworthy is that if this timeline is accurate, Huiyu regained consciousness after being thrown into the sea and struggled for several hours. After committing the crime, Wen Jiancong used his experience as a former patrol officer to mislead the investigation. He repeatedly called and texted Huiyu, asking where she was, in an attempt to create an alibi. According to the crime scene reconstruction after Wen Jiancong's arrest, he walked along a trail to the pier, where he threw Huiyu's body and her light blue handbag into the sea. The disposal site was only about 100 meters from where the victim's clothes were found. The police were puzzled because the trash dump on Linan Road, Aberdeen, and the cemetery near Taitsing Chow village were 27 kilometers apart, taking nearly 40 minutes to drive between. So why didn't Wen Jiancong dispose of the body at the cemetery and instead drive to such a distant location? Wen Jiancong explained that he was in a state of panic and his mind was blank at the time. Having served as a patrol officer stationed at the Hong Kong Marine Police headquarters, he was quite familiar with the area. Additionally, he knew the procedures and methods the Marine Police would use to handle such cases and could even gather information from former colleagues, which led him to drive to this location. On November 2nd, under Wen Jiancong's guidance, the police arrived at the disposal site. Sure enough, they found Huiyu's clothes in the bushes. It then took the police an additional 3 hours to reconstruct the crime scene. Huiyu's parents were utterly shocked when they learned that the suspect had been arrested. They pointed at Wen Jiancong and said, "Isn't that the man from the other day?" It turned out that on the second day after the crime, Wen Jiancong had proactively called Huiyu's parents, introducing himself as a taxi driver and also a friend of Huiyu, saying that he was looking for her. He even went as far as driving Huiyu's parents to the morgue to identify their daughter's body. Huiyu's parents were deeply moved, thinking there was someone who cared about their daughter. In an interview with reporters, they expressed how terrified they felt when they realized they had been sitting in the car of the man who murdered their daughter. In the hearts of Huiyu's parents, their daughter was a dutiful and caring child who had never given them any reason to worry. She always took care of her younger siblings without needing to be asked. The pain of losing her was overwhelming, and they could not find solace in their grief. Huiyu's younger sister wept silently as she packed away her sister's belongings. On November 3rd, the Hong Kong Public Prosecutor's Office formally charged Wen Jiancong. The date coincided with Huiyu's burial. 6 months after the incident, in April 2012, Wen Jiancong's trial took place at the Hong Kong East Magistrates Court. He was charged with murder. During the trial, Wen Jiancong learned that Huiyu was still alive when he threw her into the sea. He expressed remorse and cried out in court, stating that it was the greatest regret of his life. However, Wen Jiancong did not plead guilty to murder, only to manslaughter. The prosecutor argued that Wen Jiancong was not acting out of sudden anger, but was fully aware that Huiyu was still alive when he threw her into the sea. Wen Jiancong vehemently denied this, insisting that he believed Huiyu was already dead, which is why he disposed of her body in the sea. He claimed that if he had known she was still breathing, he would never have done it. Wen Jiancong's lawyer argued that he had lent money to Huiyu multiple times and that they had numerous financial transactions between them. Even though Huiyu had a boyfriend, she continued to maintain an ambiguous relationship with Wen Jiancong, making her partly responsible for what happened. However, only Wen Jiancong and Huiyu knew what truly occurred that night, and now that Huiyu was dead, Wen Jiancong's testimony could not be fully verified. After 8 days of trial, the jury unanimously found Wen Jiancong guilty of murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment. Wen Jiancong's fate was sealed. After nearly 3 years, he finally had to pay for his heinous crime. The rest of Wen Jiancong's life will be spent behind bars. However, not many people believed Wen Jiancong's testimony. Aside from the fact that Huiyu could no longer testify, Wen Jiancong's previous reputation also cast doubt on his claims. His prior dismissal from the police force for misconduct, including attempts to exploit or blackmail with explicit photos, left him widely despised. After murdering Huiyu, he feigned concern by calling her parents, while simultaneously disposing of her body and attempting to fabricate an alibi. Such actions painted him as deceitful and ruthless, There were even rumors that Wen Jiancong frequently picked up passengers in the Lan Kwai Fong area, exploiting intoxicated women by taking them home and assaulting them. Wen Jiancong was far from the innocent person he claimed to be. In this case, it took less than a week from the discovery of the body to the capture of the suspect. The swift and effective investigation by the Hong Kong police was widely acknowledged by the public. Later, the senior inspector in charge of the investigation stated that the court's verdict accurately reflected the truth and the police's efforts. He believed that anyone could see that Wen Jiancong's testimony and evidence lacked credibility. The Huiyu case has come to a close, leaving her family in deep sorrow and serving as a sobering lesson for everyone. Wen Jiancong must now pay for his crime behind the bars of a prison, facing the torment of his conscience every day. As for Huiyu, the young woman with dreams of a better life, she tragically lost her life due to her own mistakes. Perhaps if Huiyu had been content with her life, appreciated the genuine love of those around her, and resisted the temptations of wealth and status, this tragedy could have been avoided. This story also serves as a warning to young women who are enamored with materialism, willing to compromise themselves for a life of luxury. True happiness doesn't come from wealth or fame, but from sincere love and wise choices. The Huiyu case is like an indelible scar, leaving behind pain and a valuable lesson for all of us. That concludes today's video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Goodbye.